Hello everybody and welcome to what I foresee to be quite a long video on the new event coming up on Jumputi Heroes, which is the event that I'm probably for the rest of this video going to be referring to as 100 Fest, an event that they have been hyping up quite a lot, and we've actually got quite a long wait until that event starts. It will be starting on the 1st of July, which is a week away. We kind of expected it to start a bit earlier than that, and news about it to be coming out earlier than that, but that's fine. They have labelled it as a supersized event, which they don't really use that wording that often, but if we are to assume it's bigger than normal, we can expect a decently sized event for what we can assume is going to be one of the biggest events of the year. Obviously excluding the anniversary. Now, in terms of theming for the event and what we can expect from the event, they've given very little away. They really don't want us to know what's coming until they're ready to announce it. But I guess to find the answer to what this event is going to be, we need to explore the question just a little bit more. What could 100 possibly mean? This is a bit of a troublesome one to work out. Most of the time ensemble events have very loose theming to begin with. There are times when it does come together, but most cases I would say it would be borderline impossible to predict the characters that will actually be in the event ahead of time without some sort of advanced information. So let's consider some of the options we have for what exactly the 100 could be hinting at. First off, we'll talk about the big milestone that could possibly be playing a role in this event. With the addition of We Never Learn to the game's roster back in May, we've now reached 100 series. This is a huge achievement, but it does come with a caveat. And that is, in order for us to call this 100 series, we have to count each of the different parts of JoJo as separate series. So this is not really accurate, but this is how they count them in game. They do count them as separate series, and if you go on the Shonen Jump Plus website, they count them as separate series. So you can assume that this is the same sort of thing. When they were counting the number of series in the game, if they count all those JoJo separately, there we are. We're at 100. But with that idea in mind, this event could go one of two ways. Either we are celebrating reaching 100 series after the fact, the event has passed at this point, and that's the same as it was for the 476 event. 476 event was to celebrate us getting a Guinness World Record for the most licensed manga characters in a mobile game, and we actually officially achieved that record in December 2019, but the actual event that didn't come until early 2020. So they had a few months after they received that record in order to prepare an event and release an event. So perhaps again, we've achieved some sort of record, and after the fact, we will be celebrating it. It happened in May, so we're celebrating it in July. The other possibility is we'll be getting 4 new series during this event, which would bring us up to 100. Now, personally, I think the former is more likely because they've always treated JoJo and the separate parts as their own series. I think the only overlap we ever had between the JoJos was during the 476 event, actually. We had Will Zappelli as a gacha unit, and he could be used on a stage to get a Stroheim Legend summon. So there's a bit of a disconnect because it's part 1 and part 2, so that's the only overlap we've really seen in game. So it wouldn't be that strange for them to count the separate parts of JoJo as separate series in this case when they're doing their big count. Though this would raise an interesting question for the Taiwan version, because when this event comes around, they don't have any of the parts of JoJo. We assume that that's some kind of issue with the likeness and distribution rights in Taiwan, and they couldn't get, Line Corporation couldn't get the rights to use it, maybe because there's JoJo gacha games out there already, or maybe there's some other reason why they couldn't get the rights from Lucky Land Communications in order to use it in Taiwan. So there's no JoJo on the Taiwan version of the game. So if they count all the JoJo parts separately, that would mean that they would have to had 5 full series to catch up with the JP version, which is quite a lot. Obviously, if you only had 1 character from each series, then fair enough. But on the Taiwan version, historically, their original content, the content that they get before JP, it's almost always One Piece, Naruto, like Saint Seiya. That's pretty much it. So I wouldn't be expecting too much from the devs on that side of the game, but here we are. Anyway, just looking at the files, there are a number of empty slots in the series list that would suggest that series have either been saved or been scrapped or been shelved temporarily, and some of these slots have been open for some time now. We might as well discuss these slots while we have the chance. It's an opportunity to look at some of the stuff that maybe people don't see behind the scenes at Jumputi Heroes, but it is there and it has been there for some time. So the first missing ID slot is ID number 44, which falls between Bleach and Ring ni Kakiro. It's been open since year 1 of the game, and for a long time I've believed quite strongly that this is Slam Dunk. My theory for a long time has been that Slam Dunk was made for the start of the game, just like all the other series were, and they decided at some point during development that because the Olympics would be held in Tokyo, in Japan, that when that happened, they would release Sakuragi and do a, maybe not a Slam Dunk feature festival, maybe at some point, but they would do a major sports festival event for the Olympics, and then the addition of Slam Dunk would be the centerpiece of that. Now, I guess we'll see if there's anything to that theory fairly soon, because the Olympics will be not long from now. It was delayed by a year, but officially speaking, it's supposed to be going ahead. So if it does, then we will see very soon. However, there are some players that believe Slam Dunk has some usage rights issues, which is, you know, the same thing we say about JoJo on the Taiwan server. So it's very possible that the devs just can't add Slam Dunk. We have no confirmation either way, so all we can really do is wait. Another slot that's been open since year 1 is number 56. This slot in particular is one of the only ones that's pretty concrete on what it is. It's fairly clear that it belongs to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 6 Stone Ocean. This is because slots 51 to 55 contain parts 1 to 5 of JoJo respectively, and it seems pretty obvious that JoJo's Part 1 through 6 have been planned from very early in the game's development. As for parts 7 and 8, there is no vacant slots there for them to be fit in, but they kind of fall into a grey area, as the majority of Part 7 and all of Part 8 was published in different magazines. The magazines are, however, still under the Shueisha umbrella, but them not being true Shonen Jump series may explain why no slots were allocated and left open for them. The thing is, that was the situation in year 1. Since then, content from series that started in Jump and moved to other magazines, or content that only ever was published in other magazines when the series switched magazines, or, you know, lots of different instances and happenings like that have occurred in Jumputi. You know, we've had the Alma Karma situation. Alma Karma is a character in D. Greyman that never showed up in Weekly Shonen Jump, only after D. Greyman had switched magazines. Similar thing with Kinnikuman, Silverman and Goldman. The versions of them we have in game are not from Weekly Shonen Jump. They are from when it switched magazines. And if you look at the images of these characters they have in game, not just the design of the sprite, but the actual images they have of the characters from the magazines, those are obviously not from Weekly Shonen Jump. So they can use content outside of Jump. And again, it does fall into that territory. If you count all the JoJo parts separately, would 7 and 8 be eligible? If you count them all as part of one series, well, of course they would still be eligible. But again, grey area, it's a bit difficult to say what they would or wouldn't do, but we haven't even got part 6 at this point, so it's not really worth debating too much. But it's not entirely possible that those parts won't come later. They could come. But for part 6, it is certainly on the agenda for a future edition. From this point onwards, the slots become a lot less clear as to what they could be. Slots 73, 81, 82, 86, 88, 89, 90, 92 and 94 are all slots left open since year 1. However, these slots probably came a little bit later into production than the ones we mentioned earlier. All the series surrounding these came out after launch, so chances are this is a bit further into the production process, and there are a lot of options for what these series could be. If you look at the old surveys, I've got the list of series from the 6-month anniversary survey. These are the series that didn't make it into the game from that survey. There's a couple of names on there that it's kind of surprising we haven't had. There's some others that you would say are a lot more obscure or older, or you can kind of understand why they didn't get in. Maybe they don't have the popularity or whatever. In particular, I'm sad to say one of these slots almost definitely belonged to Act Age, which presumably will not be added at this point for obvious reasons. My feelings about this are a little bit mixed. I can understand why they wouldn't want to add it, and I suppose really it can't be helped. But it did appear on 2 different surveys, so very good chance that it was one of those slots. As for the other series, there is also an argument that there is a series not on this list that could be in one of the slots up until this point, and that is of course Shaman King, a big series for Shonen Jump, and there is a reason why it can't be added. We don't know how far back production on Jumputi Heroes started, but it was definitely before the incident of Hiroyuki Take parting ways with Shueisha and taking the rights for the series over to Kodansha. That was only about half a year before Jumputi was released, and at that point Jumputi was well in production. So it's possible that early in the production of Jumputi Heroes they could have planned to add some Shaman King content, but by the time it was out, it was not possible. While it's technically possible that Shaman King could appear in Jumputi the same way Dokonjo Gairu appeared in Ore Collection, despite the rights to the characters now being handled by a different company, it does seem unlikely at this point in time. Take's first Jump work, Butsu Zone, would most likely be in a similar situation, even though it's more of a forgotten or abandoned property at this point. Slot 107 is the next empty slot. This one I'm fairly certain was added after the release of the game, probably after one of their customer surveys, and as far as I can see, the only series that were added to the new survey that weren't on the old one or already being added to the game were the 3 you can see on your screen now. It's also possible that this slot belongs to one of the series that appeared on both surveys, like Act Age or like one of the others listed from before, but it's kind of impossible to say. The final known slot is 111. This slot was probably added in 2019 but wasn't visible until the end of 2020 when we got the addition of Boruto. It's reasonable to expect that this slot belongs to either Jujutsu Kaisen or Chainsaw Man, as we've had no confirmations of other new series being added to the game, and this slot is surrounded by the other series that were confirmed to be added as survey winners. So we would expect that this is another series they planned around that time to come along. It should be one of the big series from the magazine at that time that hadn't yet been added, and I think it's got to be one of those two. So after reviewing the available slots, I think it's clear that there are some series they have done work on but haven't released yet for one reason or another. It's not that strange because there are definitely characters and costumes they worked on in the past that they never released. So with all of that said, if we need to select 4 new series to join Jumputi Heroes to reach number 100, who would we add? To start, I'll reiterate that Act Age and Shaman King are off the table here for different reasons, but I don't think either of them would be added. I'm also going to say that Slam Dunk is a no-go as well. I'd be delighted to be wrong. I would love to see Sakuragi show up in this event, but I think if we're saving him for anything, it's the Olympics. So he'll either show up there or probably not at all. I strongly feel that we're getting to a point of popularity with Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen where it just seems silly for them not to be in the game, especially with how much the devs have milked some of the more popular properties like Kimetsu no Yaiba or, you know, Naruto, One Piece, the other bigger series from the past. When they see popularity, they make good use of it, and these series are huge right now. I don't know why they wouldn't want to ride the wave. So I think if we are getting 4 new series here today, those 2 have to be in. Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen have to be in. So the 2 remaining slots, there are so many options, but I've tried my best to narrow it down. I've gone with Kimagure Orange Road. It's one of the biggest series in Jump that hasn't been added to the game yet, and it appeared on both surveys without ever being added, so seeing Madoka show up during this event would not really be a surprise. I think it's very possible, and there's no reason to say that Kimagure Orange Road couldn't be in the 3rd slot. For the final slot, there are many options, but I sort of feel like they're all a bit lackluster or ill-fitting for this event. For example, there are loads of sports series like Whistle, Playball, Rising Impact, Astro Kyudan, Circuit no Okami. All these sports series have had decent runs in Jump, but they have yet to get in. However, historically the devs haven't really favoured sports series much, and if series like Captain Tsubasa and Prince of Tennis can hardly get any content, and the only feature festival we've had for a sports series has been Haikyuu, I kind of doubt if some of these series even stand a chance. And the further back you go, the more picks you'll see popping up of series that have huge runs in like 60s, 70s Jump. Series like Harenshi Gakuen, Dokonjo Gaeru, Yoroshiku Mekadoc, Koya no Shonen Isamu, and Otoko Ippiki Gaki Taisho, all in theory would have a perfectly good chance of being included. Series with huge run times in Jump, series that were insanely popular back at the time, series that do play a big part in Jump history. But the devs have definitely moved away from adding older and more obscure series over time, so I really can't imagine them adding any of these. We can also mention here that Inomaru Dashi and Hoken Shitsu no Shinigami, both of which had decent runs in Jump, have had their mangaka requesting them to be added to the game on social media. Now, as for whether this is some sort of ploy, some sort of conspiracy that these series were already planned to be added to the game, and the devs asked the mangaka maybe to help promote it on Twitter, build the hype, pretend to request the series when it was already being added, maybe that's kind of a stretch, but you see what I mean. It is a bit strange that both of those authors decided to start promoting to get their series into Jump at the same time. I would say either of these series would not be bad picks, could definitely get in, especially if we need to add 4 series at once, but in reality there are some much better options available. So instead of these options, I think I'd actually just give this spot to another newer series. Out of all the properties currently running in Jump that aren't in the game, the obvious choice is Mission Yozakura Family. It's the next longest running series yet to be added, and you would have a lot of options for content moving forward with its quite large roster of characters. So that's my picks on the screen now. If we were to be getting 4 new series to bring us up to 100. But I don't think they're going to add 4 new series to the game. As I briefly discussed before, those who were here for the 476 event, otherwise known as the world's greatest event, will know that Jumputi Heroes has a world record for the most licensed manga characters in a mobile game, which you can see on the screen now. This screenshot was taken from the Guinness World Records site just today, so it's clear that they haven't updated this record or applied to have this record updated since that event, even though at this point they would have smashed this record. I don't really know the ins and outs of how they count new versions of existing characters. Like, we have a number of different Gokus. Does that count towards the number of licensed characters, or would we only count one Goku and then move on to the next character? I don't know. But there are currently 889 playable units in the game. Even if you take all the version 2s out, we've still got a lot more than 476. I did do a quick check to see if there was a record on there for the most different manga series featured in a mobile game now that we've hit 100. However, it's not there, which either means they didn't apply for a record for this one, they aren't counting JoJo parts separately, so they'll only apply for that record once we get 4 more new series, or this event has nothing to do with us hitting 100 series whatsoever. Now, the third option is a bit tricky because I think it's highly possible that this series could have something completely different to do with the number 100. But it does seem a little odd that we have an event themed around the number 100 just after we've reached 100 series. I also think if this is a 100 series event, this would be a very good opportunity to fix some of the branding for the game here and there. Update the old website, update the Google Play and App Store pages, make sure it says everywhere includes 100 series from Weekly Shonen Jump. Wherever you can put it, wherever you can have it say includes 100 series from Weekly Shonen Jump, that is going to do a lot for the game moving forward. However, as much as we've talked about it here, I don't really know what else it could be. I don't know what else the number 100 could mean. There was an idea I quite liked, that this event could be themed around the Night Parade of 100 Demons, which could have worked either as a normal event or as a Dark Heroes event. Either way, it would have been very interesting, and that could still have been our introduction to Jujutsu Kaisen, because there is a Night Parade of 100 Demons in Jujutsu Kaisen. It would be an opportunity to maybe get Okotsu or Giotto, or maybe they could introduce us to Gojo but maybe not make him like a playable character yet, maybe for later. Would be a great way to build hype. There's a few different things they could do with that idea, and I don't know, what else could 100 be? Like series that have 100 chapters, or series that have 100 characters, or there's a lot of different ways you could go with it, but I've been really struggling to find another idea that really works beyond the 100 series idea. So how about this? An event to celebrate reaching 100 series in the game, and we also add 1 new series during the event to say, don't worry, there will be more content coming in the future. We're not going to stop at 100 series, we're going to keep going. But not really an event that focuses solely on us having 100 series in the game, more just a celebration of us reaching 100 series in the game, and then have the theming of the event be something different. I think this makes more sense with how they've done events in the past, because they need to kind of gauge our heat on new series that get added to the game before they make lots of content for it. Even if you know that Jujutsu Kaisen is going to be an absolute home run and you'll be able to do lots of content for it, it's a good opportunity to introduce a character from Jujutsu Kaisen and see just how much people care about it, and that might make the difference between the series showing up in a couple of ensembles, the series getting a feature festival, the series getting 2 feature festivals, the series getting multiple limiteds in multiple events. Like, it does make a difference to how they handle the series. I mean, Kimetsu no Yaiba is an example of that. When it first got introduced, it was just like Tanjiro and Rui, and at this point, if you look at how much content we have for it, it's very clear they got an idea of how much the fans enjoyed it, they got an idea of how popular it was outside of Jumputi Heroes, and that let them know what kind of events to do for that series, and it's done very well for them. Now, historically, when they've done major ensemble events like this, they have always had at least 1 limited from a pre-established major series. So if the event was focused all around new series, they wouldn't really be able to do that. And in order to sort of narrow things down, that is one of the things we have to consider. Another thing is we do have a One Piece event right after this one. So I do think it is safe to assume that there won't be any One Piece content in this event. So let's stop talking about content we won't see in this event, and let's start talking about content we will see. I think it's been a while since we've had Naruto headlining an event like this, so this would be a pretty good chance to add some Naruto related content. And I think, much like the 476 event, the theme is only going to be loosely tied to the 100 series announcement, if tied to the theme at all, so I've opted to give this event the same amount of content as the 476 event, which is a lot by today's standards, but as much as I don't necessarily think they're going to add that much content, they have advertised this as a supersized event, so I'm going to make my predictions on the more optimistic side of things, and just remember that my predictions are almost always wrong and should be taken with a pinch of salt. With that said, let's do this. The theme I've selected for this event is Generations. The reason I've chosen this theme is because it's a little bit vague, so you can kind of do what you want with it. Plus, with 100 series in the game, Jumputi Heroes content represents generations worth of manga content, so this would be a fitting way to celebrate that. Starting off with the first limited, an obvious choice, the 7th Hokage, Naruto Uzumaki, from Boruto Naruto Next Generations. It's pretty clear how he fits the theme, so I guess I don't really need to explain it too much. I think it's a good choice because when we finally get a Boruto feature festival, there's lots of options for characters and limiteds, including Naruto and Boruto as a sort of dual unit. So I think it's a good choice for him to be added here, and instead of having him counter one of the many enemies they've faced so far, I would have him counter Kakashi, namely the 6th Hokage version of Kakashi. That way we can sort of have the 6th generation Hokage, the 7th generation Hokage as units. Plus, you know, it's kind of similar to what we did in the 476 event, adding moments where tutors train with their students rather than necessarily picking out major fights from the series. And it's a good excuse to add a farmable Kakashi, which I think a lot of people would want. The second limited was a bit harder to choose, but I've actually gone with Giotto from Katekyo Hitman Reborn, the 1st generation boss of the Von Gola family. He's a character that could have showed up at pretty much any point until now. Katekyo Hitman Reborn so far only have different versions of Suna as limiteds, so I think it would be nice to give somebody else a limited series that when they get a limited, it feels like the only option is the protagonist. But Katekyo Hitman Reborn has some other options, and this is, I think, a very good one. As for what he would counter, I suppose we could easily make a farmable Suna or something, which would be pretty cool, but I think it's much more likely we would just have the Flame of the Night Damon Spade, who would have Spade's original form design rather than the one we already have in game. Moving on to the standard gacha, I do want to add Isshin Kurosaki from Bleach. The Jumputi devs love to throw a Bleach character into an ensemble whenever they can, and considering we don't seem to have a Bleach feature festival on the horizon, there's not one on the calendar, we know it's not going to get a large amount of content until October at the earliest, so I think it's a pretty safe pick. Isshin can counter a Legend Summon event with Grand Fisher as the boss, and the stage can give us Masaki Kurosaki as a Legend Summon, which means we can have both Ichigo's parents out of the way in one event. For the second standard gacha, I went with a somewhat predictable pick. It's Sabuto from Kimetsu no Yaiba. Demon Slayer just seems to be everywhere you go nowadays. The popularity levels are just too high, and I figured if I can squeeze a Demon Slayer unit into this event, then the devs almost definitely will. I went with Sabuto so he can counter the Hand Demon, which can drop us the new generation of water-breathing Tanjiro Kamado. Arguably it should be the other way around, and we definitely could use a new standard gacha version of Tanjiro, but I think Sabuto is a more compelling gacha unit, and It would be cool to have a farmable version of Tanjiro, to be honest. The third pick for the gacha I've chosen is Ergo Machion from Yuna's Haunted Hot Springs, the previous generation Yatta Hagane. I think that is a stellar pick from me, even if I am tooting my own horn, because she's a character I definitely want added to the game. Potentially limited quality, but considering Yuna's Haunted Hot Springs has no limiteds, I wouldn't put too much stock on anybody from the series other than Yuna / Kogarashi getting that first limited, if they ever do. She could either counter the young Kogarashi, who she was raising to be the 7th Yatta Hagane, or we could choose one of the fights she participates in throughout the series. And while I think Kogarashi is a better pick for the theme, I went with Nonko Arahabaki because I think we need to flesh out Yuna's Haunted Hot Springs roster just a little bit more, and as much as I would like her to be gacha, we can always do a version 2 later, so it's fine, just get her added to the game and we can get just a step closer to having the full roster of Yuna's Haunted Hot Springs. And the final gacha character, of course, is Yuji Isadori from Jujutsu Kaisen. He fits the theme because Jujutsu Kaisen is the most recent series to get added to Jumputi, representing a much newer generation of Jump readers and Jumputi players. Might be a bit of a stretch, but you know what? If they can do it, they will. There are a lot of options for characters he could counter, but I went with Choso. A little bit biased, he's one of my favourites, but we're going to have a lot of options to add some of the bigger fights in Jujutsu Kaisen to the game, along with other standard gacha units and such, so I think it's fine. You know, we're almost definitely going to get a Jujutsu Kaisen feature festival, if not at the end of this year, start of next year, so logically, just adding Yuji and adding Choso, I think is, you know, is a character that has a decent role in the story. It makes sense. In terms of other content for this event, I have said that I would like to include Byakuya Ishigami from Dr. Stone. Maybe as some sort of points event unit or something like that. But if anybody fits the idea of generations, it is this man. He is Senku's father, but after the massive event, which, I mean, it's spoilers, this whole bit's spoilers, but whatever. After the world turns to stone, Senku's dad is one of the few who kept humanity alive. And now there is this village of his descendants, and the village is named after him. So if we're talking about generations, a lot of time passes between them, and the stories are passed down through the generations. Very, very cool. One absolute shad of a man he is. And he would be the final character added to this event. Now, finally, in terms of extra content, I'm expecting a lot of free summons during this event. Potentially, this would be a good opportunity to take the old eras tickets we used to have, the noughties, the 10s, the 90s, the 80s tickets, whatever, and upgrade those in some way, maybe add limiters to those with a low rate, maybe do guaranteed 5 stars after a certain amount of summons, whatever. An opportunity to make use of those tickets, or at least that idea for tickets. I'm also assuming we'll, as normal, get something like a collectibles ranking mission event or something like that. We normally get something like this during a feature festival, during an ensemble event, so there's no reason not to have the same here. My idea for such an event is to have stages where you will beat bosses from certain eras or enemies from certain eras, and you will earn volumes from those eras. Complete each era by collecting enough volumes to fill the era, and then earn rewards from missions. Maybe there'll be a special stamp commemorating the fact that you've cleared each era. Maybe this would be an opportunity to give aura costumes to certain characters from those eras. Anyway, that's my event. There were definitely a few other ideas that could have worked. I was definitely particularly fond of that Night Parade of 100 Demons event. And this event still could be a Dark Heroes event. But I was a bit lost on the ideas. I mean, beyond the 100 series thing, I really struggled to find anything this could be. Even though I'm pretty certain the vast majority of everything I predicted will be wrong. It might even be completely in the wrong direction. I don't know. But anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments on who you would like to see or what you are expecting to see from the 100 Fest event. And I'll see you all next time.